So here is Genesis 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, so sacred. He's done producing things, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. So that it looks like the best day is the day when you're not producing anything, you're not making anything, or you're not at work.
Resting up.
Yeah, well, the best day is. Well, I mean, it's not. He's not exactly an employee who's resting on the weekend so that he can get back to work.
But it says he's resting.
Yes, but he's done. He's
Yeah,
done.
but he's resting too.
Yeah, he's resting. But that is, what does he do when he rests? What do you do when you rest? I mean,
Nap.
you're not working anymore, right? Okay. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created. Fine. So all this is lovely. Now, in the day, he takes a step back, though. In the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, now that was the day before he rested. When no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb in the field had yet sprung up. So there's no animals who ate grass either, otherwise they would have starved to death. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no one to till the ground, but a stream would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Now, I was going over this with my children, and I pointed out a few things that I think are pertinent to our first installments of this conversation, which is to say that here, first of all, the earth is not dry. Yeah, it's humid, humus. It is, this clay can be easily molded because of the humidity. Yeah. So now man is not just fixed as hard stone, but he can change. The same person can change, of course. He can take different paths. But of course, also, there is also a distinction between men in the way that, not all men are alike as bees are or as ants are. They're more or less all doing the same thing depending on the type, but that's not the case, of course, with man. Then the second point that I thought was worthy of to stress, is the problem of breathing in the nostrils the breath of life. He apparently didn't do that with other animals. Why? Why bother mentioning it in this case? And then, as I was reading this to my children, the image of Botticelli's so-called Primavera came to mind. And of course, they're familiar with it. So we have it on the wall. So I just pointed to it. And so we have the wind who is breathing into the girl's nostrils, essentially, because he cannot be breathing into her mouth because something's coming out of her mouth. What is coming out of her mouth, incidentally, are these flowers, okay? These leaves and flowers. So how do we understand these flowers? You're going through the air is brought in, and out come the flowers. You're breathing not for the sake of breathing, you're breathing for, yeah, the second part of the inhaling is the exhaling. And when you exhale, okay, what you're exhaling is not just air, it's flowers. Now, flowers, incidentally, for the student of Dante, are fioretti. Fioretti are is a term for verses of poetry. So she's speaking. So it is speech that is coming out. So the human being does not breathe like other animals. So he doesn't bring in air as other animals bring air, which is to say that the air that he breathes is not the same as the air that other animals breathe. Its meaning, its sense, the essence of the air that he breathes in, that he inhales, is other than the one that other animals breathe in. And we know this because when he exhales, he doesn't just exhale, he speaks. And it's a natural thing for him to speak. And this is just an intimation already through the nostrils. Why? I say, why not the mouth? That's my the child. Yeah? Why not breathing through? Isn't it easier to, whew, I blow into the mouth? No, the nostrils. And of course, basically one of the first things he does, not to say the first thing he does, Adam, the human being, is to name. And he goes along naming. He doesn't tell him, you go ahead and name all those animals. No, but we'll see, but we'll get to that. And the man became a living being. So he's a different type of living being, right? Aristotle tells us that he has a political nature. He's the animal who has a political nature. And of course, political is related to language. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Now, incidentally, there's no other animals at this point. So you point out to children that in the first account, Genesis 1, so-called, God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things and wild animals, etc., etc. God made the wild animals, and God saw that it was good. I'm skipping, but then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, etc., etc. So man was created after all the other animals. But in the second account, now you have, we'll get to it, and the Lord God planted a garden of Eden, okay, in the east. Why the east? Well, the east is where the sun rises. We're at the beginning. And it suggests that there is going to be an end. No? It doesn't say in the north, in the south. That's irrelevant for ordinary man. But if you say in the east, it's going to be where the sun rises. So there's kind of, you're suggesting that we're at the beginning of a path. And then he puts the man whom he had formed. And there, he placed them in the east, where the sun rises. Out of the ground, the Lord God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight. Now, this is the beginning of a whole series of references to sight and eyes, vision, to see, and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden. No, by the way, no prohibition, okay, against the tree of life. It's okay. It's okay for him to go to the tree of life. And the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Yeah? A river flows out of Eden to water the garden. It's lovely. And from there divides and becomes 4 branches. And there's a link to ordinary experience. At least 2 of these rivers we know of. The name of the first was Pishon, etc. And skipping, and the name of the second river is okay. And then the name of the third is Tigris, which flows east of Assyria, and the 4th river is the Euphrates. Okay. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and keep it. So he's already working the land, but it's easy, supposedly. You know, he's not just sitting there. He's tilling his garden. He's taking care of his garden without being a Voltairean character, and he keeps it. What does it mean to do that? And here is I think something else. Well, okay. And the Lord God commanded the man. Now command. You may freely eat of every tree of the garden. You have freedom, fine. And of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall die. So he has life. And then there's the tree of life. He has life. He doesn't quite know what death is. And if you don't know what death is, can you know what life is? Can you know why there's life? Where life comes from? The source of life. Then the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. He's not there for monologues. I will make him a helper as his partner. So out of the ground, the Lord God formed every animal of the field. You see now, all of these are brought forth after he is there, not before, as in the first account. And every bird of the air, and brought them to the man to see. God too wants to see what he would call them. He doesn't tell them, call them something. He said, let's see what he's going to call them. Since I've breathed, I breathed this my air into him, and now it sounds like he is going to naturally desire to speak, to name, because the names are the first instantiations of speech. And of course, the name has a verb after it. To see what he would call them, and whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all cattle, to all the birds of the air, and to every animal of the field. In other words, subhuman. That's the beginning. That's the beginning. Of course, he's going to name other things later, but that's the beginning. But for the man, there was not found a helper as his partner, an equal. He's not going to be able to speak to them. He has to find somebody to speak to, or his speech has to be developed, has to bloom, has to come of age, as it were. It's not enough to name, right? We need verbs, we need to articulate, we need dialogue. And now going back to why are these animals formed after man? And I'm not quite sure. It's been a while. Strauss refers to this, but specifically, but there's different senses in which things are formed. Is it in general as types? And so some, in the first account, all these types lead to the human type, humankind. Or is it relatively to man, so that man is here, and now he sees these things formed for himself, so that he can do something with them? You see? So it is not a chronological linear order that we're reading about. It is, yeah, relatively to something. Yeah? So it is in the order of understanding, for example, or of, yeah, what comes up in my experience and what I can do with it now. So first is man, relatively to man. Now here come the others. You see, the man gave names. Now he needs a helper as his partner. They're helping him up to the point where why were they really helping him? Really, he had all the fruits to eat, but now he can name. They help him speak. He didn't. There's no mention of them really helping him much in terms of tilling the garden. I mean, he has all the trees he needs there, but he needs a partner on an equal footing. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. Then he took one of the ribs and closed up its place with flesh. Fine, no trace left, no scar. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. Then the man said, "Ah, this at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for out of man this one was taken." Now we can have a talk. Maybe they're not the same. They're not identical. I mean, clearly there's a distinction. If we refer back to Masaccio, he's just a vehicle, even of receiving a whole tradition of thought about this. There a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. It is no longer a question of authority. It is on an equal, yeah, footing. We're speaking among, we have friends, yeah. I mean, this is what he needs training at. He needs training. Is he speaking to God? Not yet. But first he speaks to what is below him. Now what is on his level. Perhaps he can also speak to what is on top later. And perhaps then he can rise to speak as friends, yeah, to what is on top. But we don't know. These are possibilities, yeah, if this is about a kind of education of Adam. Yeah? And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Okay, what does the term naked refer to? In our earlier conversation, I was speaking about mortality. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal that the Lord God had made. Ah, boy, how are you going to answer to such a crafty fellow? They are alive, all right, but perhaps their life is not invulnerable. They're mortal if they are naked. In themselves, they're mortal. They're sustained. They could be sustained forever, for all we know, into life. But there are conditions for their life that they don't know of. They don't know them anyway. He said to the woman, "Did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden?" And we know that he is cheating.
So, just one point, so that God was speaking to Adam before the creation of Eve.
Yeah. But from the top to the bottom, we didn't hear Adam say something, respond.
Well, I mean, understanding what someone says implies the functioning of language.
Yeah, in principle, but as a father speaks to a little child who hasn't learned how to speak yet.
Well, but he understood what was said. So
in principle, supposedly, we suppose that. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
he understood it prima facie. on the face of it, he doesn't quite understand the meaning of words in our way.
Eve asked him that question, and Adam answers the question correctly, so he understood what God said about the tree. The question you just read. Eve asked him about the tree.
Eve is asking, yes, now. The snake is asking, and then Eve answers. The snake is asking that question, right? Did God say, that's the snake, you shall not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. She's answering, right? She's objecting to him as far as she can go. But God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die. Oh, to be nasty here, the perversion of the snake has seeped into her veins, and now it has affected her. She modified the prescription as well, not as much. So the snake's goal was not to convince her with his twisting, right, of God's words to make a trap for knaves. He's not twisting it so that he's not expecting her to believe what he said, but he has confused her so much.
Well, how is her answer different from?
But she added a part.
What did she say?
I'll repeat God's words. You may freely eat of every tree in the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall die. Now that's fine. And she says, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die. She has modified it in two ways.
Well, I see the one way of not touching it, but
that's the most important one. But there's also another one.
Well, it's maybe not a modification. I mean,
no, that touching is very important, of course. There's when we first hear about the two trees. There he says, out of the ground the Lord God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It is not all that clear whether the tree of knowledge of good and evil is in the middle, but we do know that the one of life is in the middle. Now, that being said, what is critical about her modification is the touching. Because what if you touch, but you don't eat? This is a sophism. Just touch. Touching is bad, she said. God didn't say you cannot touch. So what if she were to go and touch just to try and see that nothing happened? No harm to it. And if there's no harm to the first part, then maybe there won't be any harm to the second part. Okay. That's snaky. Is it? So the serpent's sophism has come into her.
What's the serpent's sophism?
But I'm just saying he twisted the words of God, right? Did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden? I mean, already the question, it's a rhetorical question. What is he up to? Does he want to convince her? Does he think that she will believe such a ridiculous turning upside down completely?
He's bringing up the subject.
Yes, but
that's what's bad. Just bringing it up because
the way he is doing it What is he up to? It's a
You're
trick.
right. That can only lead in a bad direction.
Well, it's craft. He's crafty, right? He says he's the most crafty one. He's the slyest. He's the most cunning. It doesn't have to lead in a bad direction. I mean, but he is setting up a trap. It's a trap. He doesn't expect. He wouldn't be crafty if he were expecting her to believe it 100%. But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened." Again, vision. "And you will be like God." Okay, if your eyes are opened, you will be like God. Well, it's obvious. When your eyes are open, you see what God sees, and you cannot see it right now because your eyes are not really open. Unto what? Knowing good and evil. Knowing good and evil doesn't just mean seeing good and evil. It means to see the reason why, the principles of good and evil. It means to see it inside.
Yes, it implies knowing.
Yeah, but it's vision of what is inside.
Yes, vision in the sense of.
It has to be eyes. It's eyes here, okay? There's
It could also be by hearing.
No, but
I don't want to be a pest about it, but
it's the tradition. It's the
obviously vision.
Philosophy, natural philosophy was associated to vision, whereas hearing is prophetic. It's a whole tradition.
You can imagine Socrates talking to someone who's blind and waking them up to something. I mean, the understanding passes by the senses.
Yes, but sure, you could be listening to a Socratic dialogue, but in the language of the ancients, vision was associated to a kind of pleasure that you get from, is associated to curiosity being fulfilled. Hearing is tied to, it is more, shall we say, related to piety. You hear without daring look up at the person who's speaking. You see, in the whole Hebrew tradition, there's this in the Bible anyway. There is this suspicion against seeing in the face. Yeah, it's hearing, but never seeing face to face. Paul picks that up again. When he says, now we don't see face to face in the mirror, but we hear. Here is indirect. We don't see who is speaking. Okay, the logos is okay. There's no problem, but to face the source of the logos is the problem. You see what the difficulty is here, and why there's an emphasis. There's no reference whatsoever to hearing. It's all about eyes, delight of the eyes, knowing related to vision. If you see what God sees and you cannot see now, and you don't see, then you'll have knowledge of good and evil. So when the woman saw again that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. Oh, to be desired. She's still not wise, obviously. But she sees that, that's the way. Oh, it's desirable for that. It's the desire of wisdom, which is philosophy, right? At least in the pre-Socratic sense, that's the pagan desire, divination, desire to see, to see the divine, right? The leaves and so forth. To know the future, and therefore the key to life. She took of its fruit and ate. She took it already. She touched it. And if you touch it, I'll eat it. And here's the other thing that very often I think people underestimate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. He didn't take it. She didn't say, hey, have a piece of apple here. No. She took, he didn't take. She took, she received. Almost, yeah. In the theological tradition, it's essential. The senses bring it in. The senses can be misled, very easily misled. She took of its fruit and she ate it. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her. He wasn't even paying attention. He didn't even hear the snake. He had no idea what was going on. And he ate it. He was there naming things, You were this, and she's there. Hey, how? Stuck it in his mouth. Oh, what did you do? And then the eyes of both were opened. The eyes, again, of both were opened. And they were opened up onto what God saw. What I suggested earlier is that God sees what is outside of the garden, whether physically or however you want to understand that outside, what is beyond the determinations, the good order of the garden. What is outside for you is ellipso, disorder, chaos. For you, because you only know order on the surface. Yeah? Their eyes were opened and they knew that they were naked. Oh, shoot, we are mortal. We depend upon that order, but ultimately we are mortal. And they sewed fig leaves together and made from that same tree of knowledge of good and evil. They used some of that knowledge to make fig leaves together and made clothes.
Okay, but I mean, you're just deciding that the fruit was the fig.
The whole Hebrew tradition says that it's the fig. Michelangelo says it's the fig too. I'm not just deciding anything.
Well, no. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to accuse you of anything, but it's
Yeah. Okay. That's the way it is.
It's
not of the essence, but it's just it makes sense. You see, there's no other tree there. They're standing there. He's there.
Well, there's trees all over the garden. I mean, maybe the leaves of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil are very small. So they had to go to a fig tree because fig leaves are big.
It doesn't say they go on to another tree, but
it doesn't. But it said they used it says specifically that they used the fig leaves. I mean, I don't want to make a big deal about that.
Yeah, no, it's not important, but not that important. But it does suggest that it's exposing something about it. And fig has, and the whole Hebrew tradition essentially is referring to this.
Bravo for the Hebrew tradition. I'm just, what I've got is the text.
It's a Hebrew book, and you have to count on the people of the book and the oral tradition.
Then why doesn't the Bible say there's one tree in the garden? It's the fig tree, and you shouldn't eat of this
because it's a distraction. The point is that it's a tree of good and evil. Now, for our modern purposes, who the hell cares if it's a fig tree or an apple tree? The point, however, is that in the tradition, that first of all, the fig tree, has its connotations. The fruit itself is a certain type of fruit in the Middle East. Plenty juicy, delicious, and of course the large leaves. And you could probably come up with all kinds of Talmudic other explanations. But to make it simple, the point is there's no reason to question, as far as I'm concerned, that thousands of years, a century.
Well, the only reason I'm questioning it is because what you said about that they're using the same tree to, the same tree that has the fruit. They're using those particular leaves to do this thing.
But it makes sense because you see, they need knowledge to sew fig leaves. Who the hell taught them to sew? They couldn't sew clothes for themselves. They didn't.
Okay, all right.
Right?
I don't. Yeah.
It doesn't matter now, but it just matches. It just matches just on a common sense level.
Okay.
It matches the fact that now they have knowledge to sew. Where do they get this technique? Obviously, the crafty snake may have had something to do with it, but it was, so that's the negative side, but it's a kind of knowledge. And I don't know, you see, it's sort of derived from the first primary knowledge is moral knowledge. And from this, in other words, all knowledge has a moral, fundamentally moral character. Everything is good or bad. You know, you can't just tell me I make a gun. Hey, it's not neither good or bad nor bad. But that,
Marco, I'm really, I don't want to, I don't want to appear to be just
that's fine.
Contrarian, because I'm not really sure where you're going. But
Okay.
Adam did know various things before this time. I mean, apparently he was tilling and tending the garden, so he knew some things, and
Yeah.
he knew enough to name. So it's not as
No,
if
the naming, he didn't know much. What do you mean by
well,
naming?
he knew how to work. He knew how to work the garden. So one can't.
Although we haven't seen him doing it yet. We haven't seen him doing it. He said he set him there to till, okay, but till, okay, he's not making anything. He's not, no craft.
Well, I mean, he's got to at least figure out to use a stick or something if he's going to till.
We don't really know, but yeah, I mean, maybe, but there doesn't seem to be a craft that is art.
Well, all right.
Lighting.
What you're saying is that all knowledge, absolutely all knowledge and understanding and capacity to do things springs from this moment.
No, art.
Well, but then if sowing is an art, then tilling.
No, he's making something.
But you're making a trench in the ground. I mean,
yes, but that's for food. This is not
like, you know, everything's for something.
No, yes, but it's not for the. It's not to, let's say.
All right, so
animals do it too. Animals
you're
do it
making
too. The other animals.
You're insisting that this moment is the source of art, which you're defining.
Other animals don't have it.
Yeah, but man was already not like other animals before the fruit.
Of course not. He had this the naming. The naming. What distinguishes the human being from other animals is logos.
Yes, but it's also
fundamentally it's that
he has the dominion over the garden already, and he's tending.
But that has to do with logos. That is to do with naming. He places him there to name. That is what defines him originally. There's nothing else that we're given to see. Oh, is he beautiful? Okay, he's the image, or in the earlier account. But what does that mean? In this count, what is really crucial is that he's there, and he says, and he breathes this air in him, which is a special air, which transfers when the first time he speaks to name. In other words, the first time let's say he exhales name, so to speak. That is the. So I am suggesting that this is very much in harmony with a Platonic Aristotelian tradition of understanding the human being as essentially distinguished from other life forms, from other animals, because of this logos, which stems from the divine. And however, there is a corruption in some way at some point, and because of that, he has to sort of work his way back into understanding the logos, to understand himself and his proper telos. And this comes up with the covering up of his mortality. The covering up is not just a covering up, as I earlier pointed out, but it turns out that this covering up, this product of art, which is not just to eat, it's not just something that it sort of has it is dealing with something grander, some problems not in a beastly manner. I can dig the ground to get food, No, has nothing. Other animals wouldn't do this, wouldn't sow to cover up, their mortality. And why does later sexuality become a problem? Because it comes back to this problem of mortality. It exposes mortality. And you see this in other stories in the Bible as well, but it doesn't just cover up mortality, it also points back to higher truth and ultimately the divine. It is through art there is the redemption of the art that points us back to the divine.
Well, bit by bit, I'm starting to understand your point. But really, really threshing these things out is important because truly understanding the nature of art is one of the keys to not just to understanding all sorts of profound things about the nature of humanity and the nature of human society, but also the nature of our situation today, and eventually what we can do to get out of it. So getting these things really right is
yeah,
is
paramount importance.
Yes.